Okay, now I'd like to welcome Drs. Jeff Abrams and Sheila Prindiville. As you all know, Jeff is Acting Director for Clinical Research at the NCI and Associate Director of the Cancer Therapy Evaluation Program. Sheila is Director of the Coordinating Center for Clinical Trials. Now, both of them work hard to improve NCI-sponsored studies, which is why they're here today. As you all know, the cooperative groups were reorganized in March of 2014 into this National Clinical Trials Network. In fact, the groups were consolidated, at least most of them, and the grant programs were completely reorganized. Now, with the NCTN itself coming up for review, Jeff and Sheila are visiting members to hear what's working, what isn't, and to get your ideas on making the future brighter. So, Jeff and Sheila.
Thanks, Chuck. It's a great privilege to be here on your 60th anniversary. I didn't know the timing would work out that way, but on behalf of all of NCI, I want to recognize this deservedly proud tradition of SWOG excellence in research, and just take time to reflect that study you showed by Dr. Unger just gives us pause to show how important all your efforts are every day to make the lives of many patients better, and to see it presented like that is truly a great thing. I was thinking we should get Dr. Unger enlisted to do all the groups, and then then I can go in front of the National Cancer Advisory Board and say, see, this is why you should give more funding. But in any event, I do want, and this 60 years has been an amazing partnership between the NCI and the NIH, between all of the SWOG members, patient advocates. It's quite a tribute to the partnership that goes on and makes this all possible. I think there's many other staff here from NCI participating in your meeting, as they do in most of your meetings, and this collaboration and teamwork is what makes it all possible. So on behalf of Sheila and myself, we want to congratulate you all. In terms of what, as Chuck said, we were really coming to listen to you, so I'm going to make my remarks very brief, and then we'll open the mics up to your questions and comments. Unfortunately, even though it was only March 2014 that the new NCTN grant was given to SWOG, that's 2.5 years ago already, and the new award date, which is shown at the bottom of the slide, is March 1st, 2019. So we thought at NCI we'd take July through November of this year to get feedback from the groups as to what is working and what is not. We then have to go in front of the Board of Scientific Advisors and get approval for renewing the grant. In June of 2017, we have to go through a review process internally to get the grant published, which will take place in September of 2017. Then the SWOG leadership will have their chance to write their application, which is due in January of 2018. It'll be reviewed and hopefully re-awarded when the NCAB meets in September of 2018. So that's the process that we're beginning to undertake now. And I'll just say very briefly a few words about some accomplishments and things that are coming that operationally I hope will improve things or actually give a higher quality of research. Working with the FDA, we are moving now towards a new online registration system for all our physicians and allied investigators. You'll be seeing that rolled out slowly over the next couple of months, but the 1572 signature on a paper form will go away. That's good news, but there'll have to be a log at each site of all the investigators involved in every single trial and what their duties and roles are. This will be more work, especially the first time you do it. Hopefully you'll be able to reuse it over and over again, but this is what goes on for pharmaceutically sponsored trials, and the FDA is requiring that of us as well. We are, due to the consolidation, able to hopefully improve the approach to monitoring and auditing trials. There really isn't a need to be visited by every single group now that you are all participating to a large extent in trials on the NCTN menu, whoever is the lead group. And so we will begin with the largest accruing sites to consolidate those audits and hopefully only have to visit once every 2 years. You've heard from Andrea about the informed consent changes. Similarly, with the central IRB, which has been a work in progress since 2000, it's hard to believe it's that long already, we're out in front of a new NIH nationwide policy that's going to require a central IRB for all multi-center trials. So our colleagues in other areas of medicine will have a lot of growing pains that we've already lived through, and will be well served by the central IRB being a fairly mature organization now, and one which we now have several boards to cover all the different research that's going on in the NCTN. One thing that I've asked that I hear may be coming this fall or winter is that I really think it's going to help you to know how accrual is going on a per-site basis on these trials. I think a little friendly competition is never a bad thing, plus hopefully it'll be educational, because perhaps if one site is doing particularly well on a trial, the CRAs and physicians at that site can call up and find out what's working for them that could help you in improving accrual to your trial. So on each individual trial, you'll be able to see a real-time accrual onto trials. And finally, we've embraced the modern era, and on many of your SWOG trials, you're starting to see more videos coming out with the trial from the leaders of the trial explaining this, both to patients and physicians, about why the trial is important. The technology now allows us to do that efficiently and at a price that we can afford. In addition, Holly Massett, Andrea, they've worked on a lot of survey technology to try to get a good sense before we start a trial of what are going to be the issues, when will randomization be difficult, and which particular trial, and how can we intervene early and effectively to try to improve enrollment. Similarly, we have really maintained a big emphasis on translational research. The BIQ SFP program is a $10 million a year program that's directed by Dr. Prindiville's group at the Center for Coordinating Clinical Trials. And this is an enormous advantage to the groups because we can really tie biomarkers to our trials in a timely fashion without having to go through a very prolonged grant process. We've also now been able to do away with what was a problem in the old system, that the group leading the trial might have money to pay for specimens, but many of the other participating groups didn't. Now we have a good way of making sure that the payments for specimens on our trials are similar across all the groups. There's going to be an Integrational Translation Science Award meeting. SWOG's group from Cold Spring Harbor with Dr. Tuvison as the PI has been working hard, and we want to meet with all these folks to see if this is something we should continue going on into the next grant period. Finally, a Navigator website has been built for bank specimens to help investigators do more secondary analyses and new research. This will be coming online also this winter, I hope. And finally, we've really taken what I think is a bold step. We have insisted as of January 1st, 2015, that all published articles of NCTN trials, 6 months after the publication, be submitted to a data archive so that you can researchers will actually have raw data from clinical trials on which to perform secondary analyses and eventually hook up with specimens that are also being banked to do genomic analyses and other things like that. So that's on the drawing board. Some of this is already happening and some of it is well underway. I'll stop here. Both Sheila and I would be happy to hear your questions. Again, as we begin at NCI to prepare this new grant RFA, we would benefit greatly from hearing your comments, your input, what is working, what is not. Some of that you may not feel to say at this meeting. I put my email up there if you want to write to me. But otherwise, we hope many of you will want to stand up and be heard.
Thanks, Jeff. This is really timely, and while people wander up, it seems with the consolidation of the groups and the clear split into a treatment side and NCORE, the trials with non-standard endpoints, lymph node exam and lung cancer or organ-sparing surgery versus RT trials, are not beloved by the treatment side, and they're not being prioritized by DCP. In other words, they're truly not wanted by anyone. So how do we get them assigned, evaluated, and prioritized under the new system? An easy first question for you.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good question, and in the past we have really separated trials with a treatment endpoint, whether that be improving, it could be improving quality of life if that was a primary endpoint, but it could be all the objective endpoints that we all know, response, survival, et cetera. And those have been under the purview of the treatment program. When the endpoint has been really symptom control or other non-improvement in cancer outcome per se, then the cancer control group has taken them on. As you know, they've now expanded their purview to include cancer care delivery research, so that's certainly in their purview and under NCORE as well. And so I guess what we at NCI have to do is meet and understand where to best situate this category of trials that you're discussing, mentioning. It seems to me in the past we had a way of doing that. If there are some falling through the cracks now, then you're right. We have to, within NCI, decide should they go to review committees that have been set up, steering committees that have been set up for cancer control, or should they go to the disease-specific treatment committees? And I think we're willing to listen to the arguments, but certainly find a way to evaluate these kind of studies.
Thank you. Dr. Wade?
Thank you, Chuck. Jeff, this is for you. This is a question. I'm from Heartland NCORE, and so we see trials throughout the NCTN, and they are more complex, and clinical trial accrual has gone down, and we're trying to look for ways to reduce barriers. And one of them, there's two. The first one is the additional requirement for specific physician credentialing on specific trials. That seems to be a new requirement. We had to go through a teaching course to participate in the MDS registry trial, and there's 2 trials through NRG for an ovarian cancer drug that require specific physician credentialing, and actually the software for that is very hard to get from the NRG or the agency working with the NRG, so that physicians have a tough time going through that credentialing process. So could you talk a little bit about why there's a change from in the past? We'd go through and read the protocol, read the brochure, and then accrue versus this new system where we have additional testing that we have to take. And then the second part of the question has to do with credentialing of equipment. I'd written to Hengzi earlier about how that can be a real obstacle at smaller shops, having to have your RT equipment go through credentialing, whereas it previously been satisfactory for prior trials. Now it has to be re-credentialed again for newer studies. So first would be physician exams, and second would be machine exams.
Okay, well, that's certainly a good question. Not an easy one to answer. For the MDS study, it's a very specialized study that we got a grant and we're participating with NHLBI. So I don't think that particular study is typical. The other study, the NRG, I think may be more typical. And in the past, surgeons, radiation oncologists may not be surprised of having these credentialing requirements on studies, because I think that we have had over many years. But I think on medical oncology studies, it is a little bit new. I would imagine in the one you're referring to, although I don't know it specifically, but sometimes the drug company that's giving us the drug puts in the requirement. Either it's for safety reason or something to do with their IND filing with the FDA. So hopefully this is not occurring on the majority of the studies. I don't believe it is, but I'm certainly willing to look into that. But when it's required, it's either because it was felt by the review team or the company or the FDA that special expertise above and beyond the routine was necessary for that trial. Oh, and you mentioned the equipment. Well, that one I would have to take back, Jim, and go into, if you could give me a little bit more detail. We don't credential anymore, we once did, we don't credential routine radiology equipment to do MRIs, CTs, the things you do every day. Where credentialing may come in is if we're doing some functional imaging tests, which is considered research, and therefore our staff feel that we need some standardization, because really if we do a study and we don't have any standardization, the results may not be interpretable. So I'm hoping that's where you're getting this pushback on credentials. If I'm wrong, please let me know and I'll look into it, because I don't think we want to be credentialing the routine scanners.
Warning, Dana knows everything and asks the hardest questions, but our Chief of Operations.
I've really appreciated the network approach in the last RFP and in this grant cycle. I was just wondering, I'm hoping that will continue to be an emphasis in the next round, and also asking whether there will be increased opportunities for the groups to share expertise among each other, and are you anticipating more chances for group leadership to be able to meet with each other, to have those opportunities to either brainstorm or share more information?
Well, that's remarkable to hear you say that, Dana, because I don't think that would have been a comment 10 years ago.
For sure.
And I applaud you for it, because I think that's what's going to make us stronger going ahead, people like you who are willing to work with your colleagues to make the system better. There's never enough resources to go around, no matter how many moonshots we do. And working together, I think we can do a lot more. We certainly have tried at NCI to incentivize that by in writing into the review criteria that the groups that really show that type of leadership, that help other groups to succeed, will be rewarded. And we intend to make sure that the reviewers are aware of that come time for the review of the grants.
Great.
Debbie Christie, University of Mississippi Medical Center. And just to follow up on Dana's comments, I agree that coordination among groups would be great, because the people who pay the price are the nurses and the CRAs who do the studies and carry out what we do as a group in providing data. My comment, though, or question to you, is whether or not the NCI will consider, again, increasing the compensation. I realize that you've increased it for LAPS or high accruing institutions, and you increased the overall compensation from $2,000 per patient to $2,250 for your basic registrations. However, the $2,000 rate had been in place for probably 20 or 25 years. And in 2013, when you increased the rate, yes, we had the central IRB, and all of us thought, oh, this is going to save us some time. But going along with that, we had compliance billing that also kicked in 2013. So the coverage analysis that SWOG did and has done and really got that piece going is something that we at institutions are having to implement. So we're having to process that research billing piece through our office as well. So anytime, say, by CIRB, you've got the billing piece that goes along with it. Our complexity of our studies have increased. We're looking at potentially central monitoring to where we're having more data that we'll have to submit via probably a web portal or via Rave. So there are a lot of reasons why that dollar amount needs to be looked at. The institutions that have had the lapse or the high accruing, yes, that probably helps. But if you go back to 15 years ago, I think it was the Children's Oncology Group that demonstrated that their cost per patient exceeded probably, I think it was somewhere $4,000 to $5,000 at that time. So, you know, here we are in 2016. So, but that's going to hamper a lot of institutions, I think, down the road in being able to continue to provide participation in studies. I think everyone, even the funded institutions, are struggling with how do we cover our costs.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sympathy in the room for that one. You know, we certainly understand that the reimbursement at the $2,250 level or at the $4,000 level is insufficient. We agree that it hasn't kept up with the costs of the research over time. And we increased it in the last grant period as much as we could with the funds available, and we had to make a difficult choice, so we went with the increase to the LAPS, a lead academic participating site. But we've also given high performance awards to non-LAPS sites that have been good accruers because we felt we could justify selecting them because they do have a larger follow-up burden, having many more patients. The good news is that in the next 2 years, we will be able to make many more high-performance awards because we do have sufficient funds to do that. But we do not yet have sufficient funds to increase the reimbursement across the whole system. I certainly, we intend to ask for it. We think it's well-deserved, and we understand the hardships not getting adequate reimbursement imposes. And it'll just be a question of what the NCI budget looks like and what kind of resources we're able to garner.
Thanks.
Paul Montgomery, Pacific Cancer Research Consortium. Our question that we've been struggling with has been amendments. We've got 3 protocols where we identified problems in the consent form, that there was something inconsistent with what was in the protocol, notified the research base, and they said, yeah, you're right, we do need to make an amendment to make those consent form changes. And on some of them, we've been waiting actually for several months. So it continues to accrue, but we can't open them because there were major problems that needed revision. And obviously there's a variation in opinion between sites about whether that was a big enough reason, but we're kind of stuck. And I don't know how to light a fire to get some of these amendments through.
Yeah. Well, it probably is, if it's in the research base, it's probably more a question for one of my colleagues, but we in treatment have this problem as well. This has been a big issue in the precision medicine studies where, you know, amendments come out and sites can't get it open. It's something we're all struggling with. We hope that having the central IRB would help to some extent, and I do think the problem would be worse if we didn't have such high use of the central IRB. I think it's a workload issue for the groups. Their resources only stretch so far. I think you have to address each case individually because they all have their own difficulties and problems about why something doesn't happen in the time frame you would wish it to. But I think what you're saying is, getting, and I deal with this with my staff all the time. I mean, when you're sitting there reviewing protocols and you see that to get a phase 2 study up and running still takes us 1.5 years, and then an amendment could take another 6 months, we're not doing good enough for our patients. But the system is complex. There's a lot of hurdles to get across. And I don't think it's for lack of trying, but I do, and I think we will continue to do better. We're trying to improve the systems, And, your specific case I can't help you with today, but I think if you give us more information, I'm sure Dr. Ford is in the audience, Dr. McCaskill-Stevens, myself, we'll certainly be happy to look into it.
Great.
Thanks.
Howard, you get the last question.
Thanks. First of all, I want to thank everybody at CTEP and the NCTN for NCORP for supporting us, and I think you've done really a great job. I want to thank you for all of that. I don't want to complain. I just want to say that things that actually save us money and give us value added can be very helpful and serve in lieu of some of the reimbursement issues. So the fact that we've got the master contract, we don't have to negotiate, the fact that you're now doing the coverage decisions is very helpful. And as I've talked to Andrea before, what would be really value added for the sites is to help us with getting some of our back-end work done in terms of order sets and billing templates and things like that. And so this is the kind of thing that I believe that every site would really appreciate it, because right now, probably 300 places are using Epic, and we're spending 20 man-hours, 30 man-hours each to get one order set build done. And to the extent that you can work with the companies and kind of roll it out to us and save us the time, that will be value added, and I think NCAB will appreciate that too. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. We know about the problems with the electronic ordering and getting everything into place at your institutions. We are going to work on that. That's certainly one of our high priorities. How to do it is a bit challenging to make it useful and effective, but we definitely want to try.
Great. So the NCI will also be at the Board of Governors meeting tomorrow, and I'd like to thank both Jeff and Sheila for coming to listen to our members